In the Tablet of the Branch by Baha'u'llah, the following verses have been recorded. There hath branched from the Sidratul Muntaha, this sacred and glorious being, this branch of holiness. Well is it with him that hath sought his shelter and abideth beneath his shadow. Verily the limb of the law of God hath sprung forth from this root, which God hath firmly implanted in the ground of his will, and whose branch hath been so uplifted as to encompass the whole of creation. A 100 years ago, some 10,000 people attended the passing of Abdul-Baha on Mount Carmel. 100 years later, some 1,400 Baha'is, representing millions of Baha'is from around the world, came to pay tribute to the one who is the center of Baha'u'llah's covenant. Representatives of the institutions of the administrative order, which comprised of members of 187 national spiritual assemblies, administrative committees, and regional Baha'i councils, were invited to honor the memory of Abdul-Baha, to recall his trials, his sacrifices, and his selfless service to humanity from November 21st to November 28th, 2021. The actual commemoration began on the Day of the Covenant, and we were reminded that the gathering was to prepare the Baha'i world for the next stage of its development. We're all currently standing at the close of the first century of the formative age and at the beginning of the second century. And we're also at the beginning of the new series of global plans, and the success of the coming plan depends upon us all turning towards Abdul-Baha, the center of the covenant, following his example, renewing our pledge to him, and loving the universal house of justice with the same love, encouragement, and care they shower upon us all. All of the representatives who were present were invited to take the spirit of the commemoration back to their communities and rededicate themselves to the work required to bring the plans of the Universal House of Justice to fruition. This video hopes to convey a small glimmering of that spirit based on my limited capacity. From the first moment of arriving in Tel Aviv and during the next week, the Universal House of Justice showered us all with so much love, thoughtfulness, and generosity, allowing those present 4 full days of a mini pilgrimage to prepare spiritually for the commemoration. We were blessed with such thoughtful gestures like snacks and meals being served at the reception centers for the duration of our stay there. Shuttles picked us up at the airport, and we were escorted everywhere with the assistance of the incredible staff members who were there to answer any questions and respond to any need. The staff had even prepared 2 full rooms packed with clean clothes and shoes for anyone who may have needed them. Every detail, and even more, was prepared much like the love that flows from a parent to their child. This love really was then reflected back through the hearts and souls of those present, who were truly astonished at the level of care the Universal House of Justice had taken to ensure the comfort and safety of everybody. One of the most special aspects of the trip was to meet Baha'is from around the world, and the reason we've been asked to do what we're supposed to do when it comes to the plans, it really became apparent why we're meant to be obedient to the Universal House of Justice. One of the friends that we met was a lovely woman from Tanzania who mentioned that, in her village, she didn't ever feel like she had purpose or a sense of belonging. And then a Baha'i came along and introduced them to the Ruhi books. And she said, with every Ruhi book that she did, she felt a transformation happening. And she felt that now she had a purpose and that she belonged and that she had a family no matter where she goes in the world. And so in being obedient to the House of Justice, we're not merely studying books, organizing prayer sessions. This faith, we came to understand, is really about giving a voice to the voiceless, purpose to the purposeless, and as our beloved Master has written, to bring those who have been excluded into the circle of intimate friends. Everyone present acknowledged the fact that the commemoration, the fact that it proceeded and went ahead, was through divine assistance and the universal house of justice moving heaven and earth for it to proceed. Doors that were closed, perhaps even days earlier, hours earlier, opened up, and last-minute changes in government policies made the commemoration possible. Now, we were on a bus coming back from Bachi, and this lovely friend, one of the National Spiritual Assembly members from Kirimas, this is an island in the Central Pacific Ocean. She sat next to me and lovingly asked me whether I'd had any issues coming to the Holy Land. And I said, it was a little bit difficult, challenging filling forms out. And as there were lots of forms to be filled out and lots of tests to be taken. And then when I asked her if she had had any difficulty coming to the Holy Land, she mentioned, well, there's only one flight that comes in and out of where I live. And so we had to take herself and the other National Spiritual Assembly member, we had to leave home on October 28th and make our way to the United Kingdom, and even securing visas to leave the island and make it to England. It again was a miracle in itself. And then in England for 3 weeks, they had basically laid low, staying in their Airbnb, working on the translation of Ruhi material for their area. And she said that there was so much fear of contracting COVID that they had basically stayed inside for the 3 weeks just to make sure that they're healthy on their way to Haifa. And when asked how her and her colleague would be returning home, she said, we actually don't know. We're hoping to go back through Greece, but we will probably be home sometime in January. This was the kind of selflessness that we saw in some of the friends that had come from various parts of the world, where for many it would have been impossible for them to have come to the commemoration, and yet somehow miraculously doors opened for them to be there. At the commemoration, the representatives had the bounty of being reminded of the way in which Abdul-Baha served and taught the faith. No matter what was happening around the world, he pressed on. He loved passionately, and his sole concern was for the well-being of those around him. To follow his example is really to become oblivious of our own selves. One response to the covenant, then, is the degree of servitude, how we serve this beloved cause. We met one of the friends, one of the National Spiritual Assembly members who was there from Zambia, and when asked about the work he was doing, he said there was no separation between his Baha'i work and his job. It's just something that he coherently worked into his everyday schedule. Another National Spiritual Assembly member of India, she acknowledged that she does Baha'i work in the morning. In the afternoon, she goes to her medical clinic where she serves as a doctor in her community, and then in the evening, she continues with the Baha'i work. Again, it's all coherently worked into each other, and there's no separation. I had the privilege of meeting one of the NSA members from South Africa. And when I asked her how she became a Baha'i, she said that it was through her mother. 53 years ago, two people had knocked on their door, and she said that they lived in Cape Town at the time. And she said that there was a distinct line where the blacks lived on one side of this line of the street, and on the other side of the street were the white members of the community. And she said basically you didn't cross. The blacks did not cross into the white section of town. And she said that her mother was shocked when there was a knock on their door, and here was a black man and a white man, obviously friends, asking her for assistance because their truck had broken down. And she said that she was able to help them, but then when they left for the next week, she kept thinking to herself, how is it that these two were friends? And so the next week, they actually came back to their home, and she said that her mother immediately asked them how they were friends, and they told her about the Baha'i faith. And they said they came to thank her and basically share the message of Baha'u'llah with her. And her mother signed her card on the spot. And for the rest of her life, the single mother worked day and night to instill in them the love of Baha'u'llah and to turn towards the universal house of justice and to be obedient to the messages that were being sent. And she said that her mother always carried this box around with her. And she would tell her children, her 5 children, that her most valued treasures were in this box. And she said that when she passed away, her children finally opened the box. And upon examining it, they found that it contained a photo of her children, a prayer book, a photo of Abdul-Baha, and a plane ticket for when her family had arranged for her to go to Haifa on pilgrimage. She spoke of her amazement that her mother, her whole life, the single mother of 5, had worked so hard to instill the love of Baha'u'llah in her children, and now here she was, attending the commemoration, serving on the National Spiritual Assembly. And she also acknowledged proudly that in the following month, her sister, who serves as an auxiliary board member, would also be coming to the Holy Land. And they both owed it to the sacrifice and love that her mother had for this faith and for the universal house of justice. In one of the keynote speeches delivered by a member of the International Teaching Center, we were reminded of the early believers that were in the presence of Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha, and how they immediately and instinctively would respond to the needs of the hour and the center of the faith. As we look at them, how do we also immediately respond to the call of the universal house of justice? How do we then deepen our love for this sacred institution? And how do we respond to their calls with joy in our hearts? One of the friends that I met from New Zealand, she mentioned that she was 14 years old when she was in her schoolyard, and she heard one of her classmates yelling out, Baha'u'llah, Baha'i, Baha'u'llah, Baha'i. And every time she would say Baha'u'llah, she would jump up on the bench, and whenever she said Baha'i, she would jump down. And she went up to her friend, and she says, what is this? What do you mean Baha'u'llah, Baha'i? She says, I don't know, go and ask the teacher. So she immediately made her way to the teacher to say, what is this Baha'i and what is Baha'u'llah? And she said her teacher was absolutely shocked. Now, a little bit of background story. She mentioned that when she was 5 years old, she actually didn't realize that she was different from the rest of the students by being Maori. There were 4 boys who beat her up for the fact that she was Maori, and she realized at that age that she was different. And at the age of 7, one of her teachers told her, if you hear the words Buddha or Muhammad, you better run the other way and only focus on Jesus Christ. And she said that by the age of 12, she was questioning all of this, saying, I have friends who are Muslim and who are Buddhist, How can it be possible that only the Christians are allowed entry into heaven? And so this was something that greatly bothered her. So when she heard this person yelling out Baha'u'llah, Baha'i, she was intrigued and she went to the teacher, and her teacher immediately drew on a piece of paper, explained progressive revelation to her, and she said on the spot she knew that she was a Baha'i. Today, the Universal House of Justice has summoned us all to honor the memory of Abdul-Baha, to recall his trials and his triumphs, and to rededicate ourselves to the communities we live in and to serve the cause. In a tribute written to Abdul-Baha, these are the words of the Universal House of Justice. Beloved of all our hearts, Abdul-Baha, your all was servitude, a servitude complete, pure and real, firmly established, enduring, obvious, explicitly revealed, and subject to no interpretation whatever. We reserve what words remain for a pledge of fidelity to you, for our vow to uphold the covenant that you proclaimed, championed, and vindicated, for our wholehearted expression of loyalty to your timeless guidance and expositions, to your fervent entreaties and exhortations. The world has now witnessed the centenary of the passing of Abdul-Baha. Let's remember in his words, his heart's desire. Friends, the time is coming when I shall be no longer with you. I have done all that could be done. I have served the cause of Baha'u'llah to the utmost of my ability. I have labored night and day all the years of my life. Oh, how I long to see the loved ones taking upon themselves the responsibilities of the cause. Now is the hour of love and union. Ah me, I am waiting to hear the joyful tidings that the believers are the very embodiment of sincerity and truthfulness, the incarnation of love and amity, the living symbols of unity and concord. Will they not gladden my heart? Will they not satisfy my yearning? Will they not manifest my wish? Will they not fulfill my heart's desire? Will they not give ear to my call? I am waiting. I am patiently waiting.
Amor.